morning, everybody, or good afternoon or evening, or whatever time zone you are in. We're here today joined by the awesome, incredible Jennifer Macey. Am I saying your last name right?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Jennifer Macey. She is a Vice President of Public Affairs at Ipsos in Canada, formerly named Ipsos Reid. And she's here to talk to us about COVID-19 and what we're experiencing, because I know this is giving a lot of people anxiety, and for good reason. So a lot of us are very afraid. We don't know how to navigate it. We don't know what's true, what's false, because there's a lot of stuff coming out in terms of fake news around COVID, which further amplifies the anxiety levels around here. So we're going to have an awesome episode, and I hope you love it. My name is Jeboah Miranda, and for those of you who are just subscribing for the first time, I am a keynote speaker on mental toughness, branding, and digital marketing. I run a nonprofit focused on helping women who've been affected by suicide to get a university education, and that nonprofit's called Jeboah Miranda Foundation. And now we have this podcast called In Her Blazer Podcast. So thank you for tuning in. Enjoy it, and let's have fun. So Jennifer, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm not in my blazer today. Rather, I am kind of hidden in a nook in my house as we're all, social distancing and working from home with the kids. But I am happy to be here in my virtual blazer talking to you.
With super cool art on the background wall of you, where you're sitting. So that's awesome. Super jealous. So if you don't mind, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So as you said, I'm a vice president at Ipsos. I focus on public affairs research. And what that means is mostly public opinion polling. So people are most familiar with that when it comes to election time. But that's actually a tiny fraction of what we do. And I do almost none of that. I do all the stuff around that. So survey research, we do focus groups, and then everything in between. Online, telephone, one-on-one interviews, kind of like this. And we are always talking to the public, mostly Canadians, about how they're feeling about things, awareness about things, attitudes. And that decision really helps people in a public affairs sense. It helps government with policy, decision-making. It also helps more traditional private corporations with understanding the world for their consumers. And then also do work for the media so that we can help the public kind of get a holistic view of what's going on. And you spoke briefly about fake news and, to contribute to the real information and, scientific findings of the public. Very
cool. That's awesome. I love data. I'm a super nerd, so I love numbers and research. But so when you're doing some of these research studies, how many people do you typically try and include in terms of Canada, when you're looking at Canada? And for COVID specifically, how many Canadians are you looking to involve in your research?
So I've actually been doing work on COVID for a while now. It feels like forever, kind of, not just because we're in this perpetual Groundhog Day, but also we're a global company. And so some of our offices were hit very early on, and it was on their radar screen. And because we're a global company and we kind of have our ear to the ground in that respect, we thought, you know what, we need to get on top of this. It is going to come to Canada. So we were out doing research and talking to clients, a lot of clients who frankly said, no, I'm not interested, or that's not going to matter to us, or whatever. We had been talking about it for quite some time because we could see the trend and where this was going. So in Canada, what we do is mostly online research, which just a little sidebar, research is always impacted by things that are happening in the world. So even natural disasters, we get daily updates about. We're not interviewing here or there because of a fire or whatever. And right now in this global crisis, online research is the only form of research that hasn't been impacted, which makes sense. People are more and more online, and we can continue to do that work. And in Canada, it's a preferred methodology, different for other countries that would still do more traditional face-to-face interviewing. So in Canada, we do online research. We typically speak to 1,000 Canadians. That's considered a standard sample size to allow us to really drill down into different subsegments of the population. So most of the work I've been doing to date has been minimally 1,000. Sometimes more if I wanted to drill down specifically, let's say, into one region. I wanted to go even deeper into Ontario. That's where I am, so that's an easy reference for me. If people really want to get a sense of, how Toronto was feeling, we would do an oversample there.
Very cool. And how if people are interested in being a part of the research, how can they sign up? Are Canadians allowed to sign up, or?
Oh, absolutely. You just go to the website, ipsos.ca, and join the I Stay panel is what it's called. You may also be invited to participate even if you're not on the panel. We want to ensure that we have full representation of the public, even people who choose not to join panels. So sometimes you might be invited to participate via a pop-up or an ad on your social media. And then we encourage you to share your opinions, because it is really important that decisions are made and, in government or in the corporate world, that decisions are made based on evidence, and evidence is data. And so we need you to share your data, share your opinions, your thoughts, not just your big data behind the scenes, because this traditional methodology is still important and very valid.
Very cool. So obsessed. I love it. So fun. Cool. Very, very cool. So just to jump into some of the stuff you've actually been working on with COVID, from your point of view, can you just describe, because I know everyone's just been freaked out about this virus, but I don't know if everybody, myself included, even understands the true essence of what makes COVID-19 so scary. So can you just high level tell us what COVID is from your point of view?
Sure. And that's something we wanted to check, because it's very easy to, say, oh, everyone's scared, or I'm hearing so much about this. And I remember I've been doing public opinion research for almost 20 years. Yes, or about 20 years. Anyway, so I was working during the SARS and H1N1. And in both cases, it was, and a lot of comparisons have been made in this case here. But in both cases, it seemed much more heightened based on what you were, everyone's talking about this, I'm seeing it on TV. But then when we did the research, it wasn't really something that everyone was talking about. So I mentioned before that we've been surveying on COVID for a few weeks now. And that's what we wanted to see is this on people's radar screen? Do people understand it? Are people as scared as I'm seeing in my social media threads? Because we tend to live and consume media in a bubble if we're not careful. And so we want to make sure that we understand that holistically. And what we are finding is that people are increasingly anxious and concerned. In the beginning, it was seen as kind of something distant in another part of the world, isn't going to come here. And while there is still maybe a bit of a gap in terms of my personal concern, there is increased anxiety and concern overall. And I'm tracking this week by week, and I'm seeing huge jumps. So it is there. People still consider it a distant threat, but it is something that is fully on their radar screen.
Right. Okay, yeah. In terms of COVID, is it similar? I know you specialize in the research side, which is a little bit different, but do you think it's similar from what you're seeing to a flu?
Oh, yeah. So a lot of those comparisons are made, and no, it's not similar. And it's interesting because I actually I do flu work every year for the government to help encourage people to get their flu shot. And I've done other work on, encouraging other healthy behavior like sneezing into your sleeve and all those things that are relevant right here. It is different. And it's funny because, originally we were hearing a lot of information about, well, the flu actually kills more people every year. And why don't you care about the flu the way you care about this? And those are valid points. The flu is still very important. Seasonal influenza is still very dangerous to vulnerable people, particularly the old and the young populations or people with a compromised immune systems. But this is different. So while we can make the comparisons in terms of our symptoms or in terms of mortality rates, this is different in terms of the way it's spreading. And that's why we're hearing so much about social distancing.
Okay. That's good to know for everybody. So you talked a little bit about the research you're doing, and you're sampling Canadians, and you're focusing on public opinion and what Canadians feel about all of this. But what does your COVID research actually entail?
Yeah, so it is just that, to kind of get a snapshot of what do people know about it, how do they feel about it, what kind of changes are they making in their life, in response to this, and then also kind of thinking kind of long term. So what we are seeing is that people see this, they're anxious and they're concerned. It's still seen as a bit of a distant threat, but really the public is seeing this more of a financial issue than a health issue.
Okay.
Now that will continue to change. It's one day at a time, as we're all kind of experiencing ourselves. People will increasingly see this as a health concern as it spreads more in the community, which it is inevitably going to do and has started to do depending on where you live. But right now it's more of a financial concern, hearing about people losing jobs, people who are working in the gig economy who don't have employment at this time, people who are working in the service or the entertainment industry. All of that is scary. And then hearing, about the responses that are being made around the world. Even if you aren't feeling it, you don't have your ear to the ground on finances, but then you hear the news coming out, even when they talk about the aid that they're giving and what they're doing to help prevent, that can create a lot of anxiety if you didn't necessarily know what was going on. And maybe you had, some ignorant bliss and everything's fine, I'm just living my life. But then you're really hearing a lot of the R word, recession. And people are increasingly concerned about that. We do research not just in Canada, but around the world, as I said, and overwhelming majorities across the globe are concerned that this is indeed going to lead to a recession.
Interesting. Okay. So there's so much good stuff in that. So great, but not great.
Yeah.
What do you foresee as the economic impact of the crisis? Because you do mention that a lot of people are viewing this as a financial crisis and a financial concern, and a lot of people are throwing out the word recession. And I know I've heard people in my circle and people I know who know people who are talking about, who are speculating that this might be actually worse than the 2008 crisis that happened, the 2008 recession that happened. So what are you seeing? Do you think it's going to be worse than that, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I really try not to make predictions, despite that might seem like a misnomer given the work I do. But I really think, especially in this case, we don't know. Everything here is so unprecedented that we have to kind of take it one day at a time. A lot of predictions and models that people do, in consulting or economics are based on previous data. And so they follow trends, they predict futures based on past data. And really what I think, and I know I'm not alone on this, is that this is unlike anything we've ever experienced. So some similarities have been made to other pandemics. Some similarities have been made to war times, because of that global element, but we really don't know. So the best we can do is collect the data we have now and go from there and respond to that. So the public does largely think there's going to be a recession. A lot of signs point that way. I don't know. But there has been a lot of great, quick response by government, by banks as well. At more of a personal level, like when you talk about people in your circle, we ask people what they are doing specifically. So never mind whether or not you're thinking there's going to be a recession, are you concerned? And people are increasingly concerned, even more this week versus last week, that they're concerned for their own personal finances. A lot of people have put spending on hold.
Right.
Of course, a lot of people have decided to cancel travel plans, and that might be for health reasons, but others are canceling things like home renovations or, other big ticket purchases because they're feeling a little uncertain about their personal financial situation. And some people are even telling us that they've already had to dip into savings.
Already?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, and if we consider, some people who might not have a steady salary, who might be living paycheck to paycheck, even if they do have a steady salary, or those who are working based on jobs, we've already got over 1 million who have applied for EI. So if they went into that already having some debt, and we know that based on all the other research we've been doing, people were already feeling really insecure financially and socially across Canada before any of this happened, before this was even a word that we had, before anybody even heard COVID-19, people were really feeling insecure and felt really stretched financially. So if you went into this and then, were laid off or getting fewer jobs, some people are forced to, either pull out of their RSP, get a loan, borrow from a family member.
Okay. Yeah, and I know financial insecurity is a big issue in Canada. and debt,
Yes.
and a lot of Canadians live paycheck to paycheck. So I can only imagine how that just further amplifies the insecurity and the level of fear of how am I going to even buy basic groceries?
Yeah.
So that's pretty scary. And then I know a lot of the nonprofits. So I'm not speaking to homeless shelters specifically, but I know a lot of nonprofits like Distress Centers of Toronto, which is a free crisis line. They're overwhelmed by the number of calls they're getting.
Yeah.
They can't handle the level of calls that are coming in with their volunteers, and all of these nonprofit services are just overwhelmed because they can't keep up with demand because of the crisis that we're facing. It's interesting. So when you say, because you're a global company and you've been looking at other economies, how do other economies, or how are they dealing with COVID? What have you seen as some of the trends and some of the differences between Canada and some of the other economies?
Yeah. So we are seeing some differences. I mean, the most obvious difference would be the US, which I probably don't need to highlight because everyone's probably heard everything. But, as of today, the US now has more cases than any other country in the world. Yet we're also hearing out of the US that there are expectations that it'll be business as usual come Easter. Easter is a very special time for Trump and his family. Yeah. And so he wants churches full and he wants to return. And then also in the research we do, when we look at, different segments across the world, there is still an increased proportion of what we call skeptics in the United States, despite all of this, people who still don't believe this.
Interesting. So the US, it has been hit the hardest by all of this. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think that is as of today, actually.
Whoa, the most number of cases. That's crazy.
Yeah, very scary. Very scary.
And I know each day we see new developments, new stories come out about lockdowns and closures, and Trudeau putting out the new rule that everyone has to close down and all of that. And schools are looking to push back the date for when universities and kids can return and all of that. Because of all those lockdowns and closures, how has the public responded to this? In your opinion, what have you seen?
Yeah. I mean, I can speak for the school closure myself. Right. I remember when that was announced, even though I was living and breathing this file already, I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Right. And I can't believe it. And I knew better. I'm working on this and I still couldn't believe it. And now, of course, right, each day our perspective changes. And of course it makes sense. And it is looking less and less like, we'll be returning to the school year at all. And frankly, that's a good thing. And that's me speaking personally, but also in the research I do, we see that the public is really positive towards all of the decisions that have been made to date, all of the shutdowns. They're very, very supportive of everything, including closing the U.S. border, mandatory lockdowns. And again, this is changing day by day, right? So, and it varies province by province, but we do see across Canada that people are very happy with what's happening, particularly in Quebec. They're very happy with their provincial government's response. And as you might know, the Quebec government was one of the first to announce closures of non-essentials, the bars and restaurants to cap entrance and things like this. And of course, now, I have a friend in Montreal, and she went into a coffee shop with her daughter yesterday. I said, wow, your coffee shops are still open? Yeah. Ours are closed. I don't understand. You guys went first. So everyone's just kind of, it's, as we've said before, this is unprecedented. So everyone's kind of taking it, we might make a drastic response here and then not there. And by tomorrow, that coffee shop will probably be closed because everyone's trying to figure it out. But the public is really supportive of that. And then when we look at government ratings, the public is also pretty happy with all levels of government right now. Again, particularly at the provincial level, which is not unusual in times of crisis, that people tend, or governments tend to receive positive ratings because people really want to come together. So while we might look at a rating of the federal government and say, okay, well, that's, fairly good. Well, it's a lot better than it was before all of this because people are feeling really good about, in our case, for our federal government, Trudeau's response.
That's a really good point. Okay, right. And I know a lot of people are concerned because how easily it is to catch COVID-19, just going out or touching a bag and then touching your hair and all of these things. And there are a lot of single parents. And I know there's a lot of worry amongst single parents because they have no choice but to bring their children to the grocery store. Or just anywhere in public, and they're afraid that their children might get sick. Is there anything, do you think, being a mom, and I know you have a partner, but being a mom, that they could do to just reduce the risk of having their child get sick?
I think it's important to be aware, but not to create too much anxiety or fear. And, keep those distances, like on the sidewalk, across the street, keep the distances in the grocery store, not touch things. When you go shopping, just don't touch things, and tell your child as much as possible, don't touch things. Like pick up the one thing you want, put it in the bag. We've been using the click and collect service that Loblaws offers. It changes the way we do things. I need to think like a week out in advance because there's kind of a backlog, of course, because they're really encouraging people to use the service. I'm also thinking about, what else can I order online versus going to the store. Just making fewer trips to the store, practice social distancing when you go, order online if you can, or if there's anyone you can lean on to, if they can, a neighbor or something who can do shopping, or they say, oh, I'm going to Canadian Tire, does anyone need anything? And he can do the shopping for the block and then drop things off on everyone's porch. And that means fewer people who are going to Canadian Tire. I don't know why I keep saying Canadian Tire, but that was the example that was there. And I needed a light bulb. So, but going less often and asking for help and offering help when you can. If you offer help, others, they might not even think. We work and live in this world where we promote busyness and self-sufficiency. And if we offer help, or if we ask for help, it will encourage other people to do the same thing.
I love that. Yeah, that's such a good idea too. If you can ask your neighbors to go to the store for you and then send an e-transfer to pay for the stuff that they bought for you. That's such a good idea. I love that.
Yeah. It's just a way of switching our thinking. And I think because we work so fast and so frazzled that when you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? But it's because we're not giving ourselves time to think of these things. So share tips. Anyone who has tips, just share them. And that's we're all in it together.
Yes, listeners, please share tips. We all want tips. So thank you. No, that's awesome. I love that so much. I know we're all in the thick of it, and no one really has idea of when this is going to be over, because this is new. This is new territory for all of us, the economy, our health, etc. But how long do you think this will take for, I guess, us to get through it, and then from a financial perspective for our economy to actually bounce back?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I do think it will be a long time. I think we're estimating or expecting there to probably be 5 phases, and that we are in the first phase. And that would be, that increased anxiety that I was talking about before. So we're in very early days, I think. Then, as things get bigger and bigger and that community spread happens, because it will happen, you then will move into a phase of either coping well with that or, the whole system collapsing because it wasn't prepared for it. And so we've seen that, in different countries. After that, we will move into what we, are going to probably think of as the new normal. We'll probably think everything's all done and back to life. But what happens often in pandemics is there is a resurgence. So I think there should be an expectation of a 4th phase where, there could be, more occurrence, and just to be prepared for that. And then finally we'll come out of this in a whole new world and, understanding that we will have new sociodemographic trends, because everything will have been shaped. And I can't say, but I am hearing a lot of people who expect, this to be a full 18 months to go into all those phases. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to be in self-isolation for 18 months, but that, it could be 18 months before we, come to that fifth phase. So I don't know myself, but that's some of the information I'm hearing and that I'm digesting. But I do think it's fair to say that we are in very early days.
And you said, so we have 5 stages. Can you list the 5 stages?
Yeah. So the first one would be, this increased anxiety that we're in right now. The second one would be either coping or collapsing with, the situation and how that affects our society. The third would be maybe a new normal. And then after that, a resurgence would be the fourth. And then the fifth would be a full new sociodynamic, society.
Okay. So those are the 5 stages. So in terms of credible news, where do you think Canadians could go to for trusted information and regularly updated information on COVID-19 and what's happening there to stay informed?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that people do need to stay informed, and we are tuned in more than ever and on our screens more than ever, but we need to be careful about some of the fake news out there or fear-mongering. In our study, we do find that people are more and more understanding that this is real and are less likely to think that the media is exaggerating things. We had seen that in our international research before, but people are understanding it more now. So I would say, stick with your trusted advisors, traditional or known media outlets. Listen to the scientists, the epidemiologists. They know about this. Let's leave it to them to tell us what to do. And you'll notice that a lot of the politicians who are speaking in press conferences are referencing what the public health officials are recommending. And then, I've received lots of emails from various places, and I'm sure others have too. If you click in there, there'll be links to your public health unit or to Health Canada. My kids' school, they send an update, and on the school board website, they have somewhere to go. So I would just go to one of I'm saying it again, but maybe one of your more trusted resources and see the links that they're providing.
Can you recommend a trusted resource that you go to, or an epidemic? Wow, that's a fun word.
Yeah.
Epidemiologist that you follow?
Yeah. So what I would do is I would think about your local community because they'll also have the updates of, where to go in your neighborhood as well. So as I said before, I live in Toronto, so I would go to Toronto Public Health. I could also go to the Government of Ontario Health website to see that way I could get my telehealth number. I can call telehealth. If I feel like I have symptoms, I can run it by them before going to the ER. The last thing you want to do is go to the ER if you don't have to, which is really the last thing you should do in any case, but specifically right now. And that way you can look at the symptoms, you can talk to someone, you'll be able to talk to a nurse, and then figure out where to go from there. Okay,
so great. So telehealth for those who live in Ontario, Ontario Public Health, General.
Yeah, or your public health unit. Each municipality has a public health unit.
Each municipality has a public health unit. Okay, yeah. Cool. And then my very last question for you, so I can let you go back to your fun children. So I know we talk about coping skills a lot because we have to cope to get through it. So
yeah.
And thrive once we're out of it. What's a fun coping skill you implement? Because something for me is I like to randomly, when no one's looking, have dance parties. So that's
fun.
Because I just get to experience like a burst of joy for like 2 to 4 minutes. So that's like my thing.
Yeah. So I've been doing a couple things. I mean, there are some that probably aren't good, like, indulging in bad foods or something like that. I'm trying not to do those ones, but instead, forcing myself to go outside, particularly when I look at the weather and I see it's going to rain. So today, I was really surprised to see the sun. I have hundreds of emails I have to get to, but I'm going to tell myself, no, you have to go outside, go for a walk, listen to a podcast to, get away. The other thing I did is we were supposed to be on March break last week on a ski vacation. And even though I knew I was going to be working, I thought the kids would be skiing and everything. And of course, none of that happened. And we decided instead of coming home, we'll still stay at the chalet we were at because, we could social distance there and, give us a change of scenery. And we pulled a puzzle out from the bookshelf. and started working on a puzzle. And it was, I hadn't done that in a long time. And I'm like, I'm going to find a way to bring this back home. Not that specific puzzle because we finished it, but I got a puzzle and now I've got that sitting on our coffee table. It's just something to go to that is not a screen. If I am inside and I can do something that's not a screen or not a, I'll do the dishes, or I'm going to take a break and I'll cook this or do this laundry, because I do find, as a working mom, and I work from home a fair bit, the beauty of working from home is you can juggle home and work, but it also means you're just always doing work, whether it's housework or work. So if you can make sure you have like little peaceful stations set up, that's my thing. Otherwise I'd be, eating ice cream, drinking wine, and watching Netflix, which probably isn't a healthy coping skill.
Right, fair. I like that though. I love that, bringing it back to traditional forms of connecting, like a puzzle. I need to say that's a traditional form of connecting now, but I love that because I'm super into board games too. So I think now's an awesome time to start getting back to that.
Well, and I like that it's something that other people can sit down and work on it with me, or it's something I can do by myself if I want to be alone, or I'm not forcing everyone to be like, no, mom wants to play Scrabble now, we're playing Scrabble. I will warn you though, once I decided to do this and I went online to order some puzzles, they were hard to come by at Indigo. So I don't think I'm the first one with this idea.
Okay.
So maybe, I was thinking maybe I'd do a puzzle exchange with some neighbors.
Cool.
If any of them have some, because I'm going to be finished this one soon, hopefully.
Very cool. And then Lysol it up.
Exactly. I think you can put things outside for 3 days. Check with your public health unit, but I think you can put things outside for a few days, and that works as well. So
very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Jennifer. If anyone wants to get in contact with you or follow you, where can they go?
Sure. My email address is jennifer.macey@ipsos.com, or I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. You can just Google me. Macey, Jennifer Macey at Ipsos.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So, well, thank you for having us. And to all the listeners, thank you for tuning in and for subscribing. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review. We really, really appreciate the review, and tell everybody you know about it. And always, 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 always happy to connect offline. So you can just reach me on my website, jeboahmiranda.ca. Add me as a friend on LinkedIn at Jeboah Miranda, or you can follow me on Instagram at Jeboah Miranda. So thank you, everybody, and let's kick ass together. All right, have an incredible day. Bye, everybody.